Meet Jalsa Urubshurow, founder and CEO of Nomadic Expeditions, and discover his journey, his passion, and his roots. Listen to the story of Mongolia as the home of some of the most breathtaking wide open spaces in the world. From the rolling sand dunes of the Gobi to the golden eagle hunters, Mongolia is a diverse destination filled with adventure for the body and mind.
Thank you for the opportunity, because I think we have to do all of this, Tina, and I think you've been doing a great job.
I have two questions, Jalsa, that I really want to dive in. And I think that they both have to do with the essence, the DNA of the incredible company that you've built, and also I think your DNA in your story. And so my first question, and I know it's a topic that's dear to your heart, relates to cultural identity. And I wanted to know, why is it fundamental? And what role did it play in the creation of nomadic expeditions?
Mongolian was my first language. My father used to say when I was home, which means when you're in the house, you speak Mongolian. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed ones with the wrong religion will teach you English. So maybe not politically correct, but he spoke 4 or 5 languages fluently because of his survival. This path he took to survive, and you learn. And he even knew the Mongols have the most accurate genealogical tracing system. That's an oral tracing system where you tell your son what colored bone, what tribe, and it'll put you within like 100-mile radius of where your ancestors were 1,000 years before. So it's quite amazing. Wow. So fairy tales, the stories he told. So even though he grew up and was born in this Russian region, they lived exactly like they did in Mongolia, and he would talk about Mongolia as our ancestral homeland. And so that's what really led to, we had contact with them, Tina, from the 70s and 60s. My uncles did. And at the time, Mongolia was communist. It was communist for 70 years. It was the second communist country in the world after Russia in 1921. They formed this alliance with the Russians, and it saved them. The Japanese, the Manchurians, and the Chinese, obviously, the borders were very tenuous. And so when they were recognized by Russia and they became the second communist country in the world, they became essentially the first Soviet satellite country, and they were also buffer between Russia and China for part of its border. So it's an interesting thing. There's a famous battle when the Japanese invaded, it was in 1930, I think in 1938, 39, the Battle of Halk Gol, the Halk River, where the Russians sent 50,000 troops. That's the eastern grasslands of Mongolia, by the way, the largest unfenced grasslands left on planet Earth. The Serengeti of Africa is about 40,000 square kilometers with no fences. And the eastern grasslands of Mongolia is about 260,000 square kilometers with no fences. So this area, there's this beautiful river. The Japanese had crossed it, and the Soviets, joined by the Mongolian army, which was not quite as powerful as the Russian army, turned them back. And I remember going out there in probably early 90s, overland grasslands, just amazing grasslands, and finding a Japanese helmet with a bullet hole in it. It's on.
Wow.
So, it's kind of wild, the history.
And this story, this DNA, the importance of your origins, your roots, is fundamental in the experience that you offer today, right?
Spiritually and actually, as far as events. So, as I said, we had contact. My uncle became particularly acquainted with the only presence Mongolia had in the U.S. besides these 580 Kalmucks who were 400 years removed. The 1600s is when they migrated to Russia. So,
yeah.
So Ulaanbaatar, the Halk Mongol is the predominant tribe. They're kind of ethnocentric. We'll talk about the eagle hunters later in the West. Those are Kazakhs who've lived there for centuries, but that's the only non-homogeneous province in the whole country, where it's 90% Kazakh and Muslim. But my uncle had contact with them. So they opened a mission to the UN. So communist countries, Iron Curtain countries that didn't have diplomatic relations with the United States were allowed to have a mission to the UN, but their officials and their staff were restricted travel. They couldn't go outside the 50-mile radius of the General Assembly building at the United Nations.
Wow.
So our neighborhood in New Jersey was about 41 miles, something like that. So he had contact, and the Mongolian ambassador to the UN, the very first one, and he went on to become the first ambassador to the US when they opened an embassy in 1990. He had come to my uncle's house in the late 60s, early 70s. And one time I was a young man, I had bought a van or something, an old secondhand van, but it was new for me. Maybe it cost me $700 or $800. I don't know, but I was a carpenter working for him. And he said, "Listen, I want to borrow your van." I just had it about a week, and I said, "You can't borrow my van, my new van." but I said, "What do you need? I'll help you." And it was a Sunday, which I worked 6 days a week, and Sunday, he said, "Be at my house tomorrow at 7 o'clock." I said, "Okay." And I got to his house, and there was a sheep tied up on the lawn. And we're in a little suburban development, but no two houses alike. We were building all these projects for U.S. Home, these big conglomerates, right? And all of our houses were different, Russians and Mongolians. There was a Russian Orthodox church next to our first Lama's Buddhist temple with the onion dome. But if you saw scenes, little babushkas with scarves, there's a great documentary. I'll have Undra send you the link. That was shot when I was 6 years old in that community.
Oh, wow.
About these Americans from Jungaria. They called it the same, Xinjiang, and told about the whole migration. So that was filmed in 1961, I think. So anyway, this neighborhood is it's like you drove in and you're like transported back in time, like Russia, dirt roads. So that's, my uncle had invited them several times. But when I got there was this sheep, and apparently they had a conversation because, they had the mission. In the summer months, they would go to, the Russians had a huge compound in Oyster Bay, Long Island, their summer compound to get away, a big mansion. And they gave the Mongolians a room or two, So they would go there in the summer, but they were complaining that they hadn't had fresh mutton or any meat, It's all packaged off the shelf. So in our neighborhood, believe it or not, we had all these different houses, and there was Oka Serno, we all got our holiday, the new Lunar New Year, whatever. So he had a little ranch style subdivision type home he built in the back, he had 30, 40 sheep at any given time. So he was the local butcher for us. So here we are, we shove a sheep in the van, and we're driving through the Lincoln Tunnel back in 1978, I think. Around 78 or 79, something like that. I remember paying the toll booth to the toll collector. My uncle's there's a sheep in back, doing all kinds of things. We get to East 77th Street. The Mission is right across from the Mark Hotel next to Central Park. It's right there, East 77th and Central Park. So
I used to work there. I know exactly what you're talking about. At the park.
The park is there. So, it's one of those 6-story brownstone, beautiful townhouse. They bought it in 1966 for, I think, at that time, I think they bought it for about $270,000. So it's probably worth $15, $20 million, I think.
Millions for sure.
But so it's, the Mark is like just a few doors down on the same block. It's right next to the park, right? It's on the same. So here we are at 8:30 in the morning. The ambassador came out, so there's a Cadillac there. He rolls up his sleeves, and here we are on a Sunday morning at 8:30, 3 Asian men shoving a sheep into the back seat of the Cadillac. And I'm going to tell you, Tina, the windows were flying open. People again, you could cry murder, and nobody's going to open the window. The cops were there in like less, and it's a one-way street, going towards Central Park. They came in from both ends. I said, how do they do that? They pull up, and they're like, what, New York City cop, he's like, what is going on? And I said, officer, that's the Mongolian ambassador to the United Nations. That's my uncle. The sheep is a gift for a picnic. And so he said, get out of here. So I said, look, it's got diplomatic plates. So literally the ambassador went inside and got his credentials because he couldn't speak great English. So he was pretty good because, he was trained to be at the UN. But, my uncle, he spoke a lot like my uncle did because they were all in Russian schools. And so they had the thick Russian accent. So here I'm translating, and he came out with his credentials. And then the cop looked at me, and there was another cop there, and they said, just get the thing out of here soon, will you? People are calling. So that's how far back we go with them. But 1990, when they opened the embassy, and I had actually helped them look for the ambassador's residence in Washington because I was already in construction most of my life. They were traveling from the mission to the UN in New York, driving to go to Washington, to the new embassy. So I knew about it, and I invited them to our community. So by that time, we had 3 Buddhist temples in our community. Genghis Khan spent 40 years fighting other Mongolians before he conquered the empire. It took most of his adult life. So Mongolians are a tough audience. It's the truth. So we ended up with 3 temples. So, it's one of those things in life. We ended up with these 3 temples, and they came to one of them. It was called Olmagazan, everyone's land. And we tried to, we had a reception for them. They were like flipping out. They were saying, and I had elders there, and I speak very well compared to my contemporaries because we all grew up. I was born in I was the only one in my family born in the U.S. So, my father was right. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed ones with, I like to say the other religion instead of the wrong one, but they do teach you English. Assimilation, he knew, was not the challenge. He knew that was an expected occurrence. He knew then maintaining your culture and tradition and knowledge of this was
the hardest.
Very hard because, especially when and he didn't learn English, except a few times I did. When I was like in kindergarten, first grade, I did the ABCs with him. I was his teacher. I was also his translator. We would go on, we'd take a bus for a nickel to go get fabric. My mother was a seamstress for 40 years. And, so they lived a tough life. They buried 3 of their sons, and they survived Stalin and Hitler. They invited me. I went September of 90, but believe it or not, perestroika happened. So my mom and older brother, when I was in Mongolia in September of 1990, they were in Kalmykia because that had also opened up. That's when they went to go see my first cousins we found from my father's side. So it was really amazing. I was in Mongolia because I started this business council. And so when I got there, they put me in the presidential palace all by myself. I'd wake up in the morning, it was like 60-foot table and 2 soldiers. And I'd ask in Mongolian for eggs and indigo. So it was like, I said, I have to get out to the countryside. They called the chief of staff. When I got out to the countryside of Mongolia, I was just amazed. Mongolia has the largest horse-based nomadic culture that still survives. And it's dropped when gold mining became great. Their economy was booming, skyscrapers and cranes all over the capital. It dropped to 18% of the population. The total population is 3.2 now. At that time, it was 2.5 million. And the capital city had 600,000 people, which it was designed for. Now the capital has 1.6 million people. And nearly 30% of the population still has goats and sheep and live in the countryside. The price of meat is high. So if you have 1,000, head of cattle and sheep, and you can do quite well, the price of meat and et cetera,
So that first impact of you getting to know Mongolia, express what struck you as the strongest connection or emotion?
I'll never forget, I went out to the countryside, finally got out of the capital. And, the city changed dramatically in the last 30 years, plus 31 years. I mean, I was in the best hotel they had, the Ulaanbaatar hotel, built for the Russian dignitaries and whatnot, two winding staircases and you could look out your window. It was 5 stories high. I'd be up on the top floor and I'd look out my window and I could see the Choja Lama temple, the last theocratic ruler of Mongolia built. He was an amazing Renaissance man for Mongolia. But then you get out of the capital, even an hour drive to the countryside, and you'll see people living with their herds and moving their gear 3-4 times a year to winter pastures, summer pastures, spring pastures.
Would you say that the experience and this DNA that's so authentic, that's so exclusive, that's so intimate, that's so special, more aligned with demand today than ever before? Because I think that, there has been a trend, or let's call it that, a desire for experience. But now, with all that we've been living through, there is a growing demand for sustainability, for places that are taking care of culture, of the environment, of being secluded, because somehow it feels that if you're secluded, you're safe, right? So suddenly we have this new definition and desire. And it sounds like every time I hear you speak, though it's already magical, regardless of what moment in time we're living, it's almost more ideal now than ever before. Is that even possible? I don't know.
Well, certainly I think when you look at a pandemic, clearly having a place where let's see, China is the most densely populated country in the world. When you take its population of 1.8 billion, I can't even keep track if it's 1.8 or 1.9 now, and the territory. So Mongolia is the 165th most sparsely populated, densest planet in the world. So it's, there's places like Antarctica, less populated. So, but so when you get there, certainly social distancing is not an issue. But in these wide open spaces, we have a saying also, Mongolia, we say, only in wide open spaces do you truly have vision. And when you see these vast horizons, it's kind of really a place that can make you see. And I think it's been an inspiration for me for a variety of things, and the cultural things like co-founding the Golden Eagle Festival, which we also have an environmental. So you're talking about directly related to sustainability. Yes, seeing people living in harmony with nature. We're driving our Priuses. We worry about where the batteries are going to go, or you have your Teslas, or riding bikes to work, and all valid things to reduce greenhouse emissions and help protect our air and our planet. But here they are living in harmony with nature. They're not, think about their impact, and it's really amazing.
I think one of the things that's celebrated and that I want to congratulate you on is that your mission has always been to preserving, promoting, and sharing. And I think that is more important now than ever. We're like running out of time, but I think that's such an important message that is so alive today, and that has been in your heart and in everything you do throughout, which can be heard in everything you say. So
thank you, Tina, for the opportunity to share that. But you've got some images I know you're going to be sharing, like the Horsehead Fiddle Ensemble. This is an ensemble that was literally created 50 years ago, but they had their 25th anniversary for them. And we had coincided with our Nomadic. So we invited the whole ensemble, and we helped them film videos, and we took them on top of the famous cliff. But we also sponsored the local musical school.
Jalsa, it's a pleasure to always catch up with you. You are an amazing storyteller, and you just make the desire to visit more and more alive. So thank you for your time. I'm so
My
excited
pleasure.
to be able to share the story, and hopefully we'll be seeing each other soon.
No, it would be my pleasure anytime, Tina. It's very generous of you, and I really love your talks, and I love what you're doing, and I love your generosity. It's not about business for yourself; it's about promoting the world. And, I'll close with a saying I used to hear my father say at weddings. I told you he was a great talker. Maybe there's some genetic, but
Maybe.
he had better, amazing things. But I never heard this again until 20 years after his death and passing. I went to Mongolia, and it was just amazing. So in Mongolian, they say, Ava em de battle, olin huntatino, nurin em de battle, olin gazarer, which means while your father is alive, make as many friends as you can, and while your horse is alive, see as many lands as you can. To me, the beauty is this. None of us as parents should measure our children by wealth, fame, fortune, title. But if they're well loved with real friends, that's success. And about your horse, Mongolian pony, Boeing, whatever it is, if it takes you to many lands, it makes your world, your mind, your heart larger. And I think it helps break down racism, ethnocentricity, all that. So I think not bad for a 1,000-year-old saying.
How beautiful is that? Thank you for ending with that beautiful message, Jalsa. And we will be in touch soon. And I'm excited to be able to share the story. And I'll remember that saying forever.
When we meet again, we'll toast to many friends and many lands, Tina.
We'll look forward to it. Thank you, Jalsa. Have a great week.
Take care. Be well. Bye-bye now.
Bye.